My guest on concert night this evening is composer Kevin Putz, whose piece Inspiring Beethoven you heard to open tonight's concert. Kevin, welcome to the program. It's wonderful to see you and wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you. Very, very nice to be here.
I think we have met maybe only one time before, very briefly backstage after Cincinnati Opera had performed your amazing opera, Silent Night, which is something I'd like to talk about also. But it's nice to see you again. Can you tell us a little bit about how you have fared during the past year and a half of insanity in our world?
Yeah, well, it's been it's been a challenging time, obviously for everybody. I think for composers, well, I guess I speak for myself that I have felt pretty fortunate. That I've had projects that I was, planning to work on and did work on, though sometimes I felt less inspired than others, let's say. I think one of the things that is inspiring for composers that keeps us hearing our music played and seeing our music played, just sort of engaging with musicians. And when that isn't there, you sort of have to rely on the dream of what could be possible for the piece, someday that you imagine it being played, and of course you listen to a lot of music and recordings. But so I worked on a big opera, which I just finished, and there were a couple little other things too that came along that I worked on, and I taught. I still taught my students at Peabody through Zoom. So, yeah.
So I'm trying to think. I think the very first piece of yours that I ever heard is a piece whose name I cannot remember, but I remember the piece very vividly, hopefully correctly. It's a good test of my memory. I heard it when my wife and I were in Pittsburgh visiting some friends, and we went to a concert, and it was a piece, I think, for kind of large wind ensemble, a very aggressive, noisy, angry sort of piece that made a real impression on me.
Huh.
Does that ring a bell?
Wind, I mean, like a band, like a big wind ensemble piece,
Yeah,
or a smaller group?
I would say like 20, 25
Oh my gosh, I know.
players. That's what I
I
remember.
bet I could very well have written it, but I can't remember, I can't remember what it is. I'll have to look.
An early piece, but I
I
remember it was a piece that really struck me. And at the time we had a chamber orchestra series, and I thought, oh, that would be a real, pardon the French for the radio audience, a real kick-ass piece to play on that series. And then the series got canceled, and we never
Oh,
had the opportunity. And then, of course, I had the chance to hear and see Silent Night. And I think you have a marimba concerto, don't you?
I do, and actually, I'm happy to say that a recording of that is coming out soon. We just recorded that with Baltimore Symphony this summer, actually, with distancing protocols, etc. I kind of updated the orchestration because I wrote it like 25 years ago, and I've learned a few things since then. So, but yes, and that performance you mentioned of Silent Night by Cincinnati Opera was truly one of the best I've heard. I mean, it was just a fantastic cast and orchestra, and everything about it was memorable for me. So.
Well, since we're talking about Silent Night right now, let's talk about it a little bit because I think it's the best and most powerful opera I've seen in the last 15 years. It
Thank
has
you.
beautiful music in it. It has a lot more singing than we sometimes hear in contemporary opera, less kind of speaky kind of stuff, lots of melody, and a powerful story, and it builds up hope, and then it has this tragic conclusion as the war goes back. Why don't you tell us, for people who don't know about Silent Night, give us a little sort of elevator speech about what this opera is about.
Well, it's based on it's based on a film called Joyeux Noël, French film from 2005 by Christian Carillon, and it's about the spontaneous truces and ceasefires which happened along the front, the French front in World War I, on the first Christmas Eve of World War I. And these things that actually happened are pretty well known historical um, facts that on certain places along the front, the soldiers just decided to stop fighting, and many of them didn't know what they were really fighting for exactly, except for their countries. And so, so it didn't take a whole lot for them to get out of their trenches and start sharing champagne and pictures of home and play soccer in the morning. And it's a really interesting and incredible moment in the midst of a horrible, bloody war that we adapted for the opera stage. And Mark Campbell wrote a beautiful libretto. And for me, it was just a completely new experience because I had mainly written orchestral music and chamber music and not a whole lot for voice. And so it was, it was, scary to take on such a massive project with like a big chorus, and we decided to have it in 3 languages. And but on the other hand, it was so much fun because I felt like I was able to be a storyteller, sort of for real, like with music, not an imaginary story, but an actual story. And so I as soon as I started the opera, it just sort of went from scene to scene pretty easily, and it was frankly a joy to compose.
And I remember thinking that if I remember correctly, the introduction, the opening scene of the opera actually takes place in an opera house with a
That's right.
performance because one of the characters is an opera singer who then gets mobilized into the war. And I thought, this is such a brilliant way to start a contemporary opera because it sort of lets the audience in a, they're disarmed, so to speak, right
It,
from the very beginning.
Yes, good word. Yeah, I mean, it was really fun to write that because I got to draw as soon as I saw on the libretto. The curtains open on an opera house in Berlin, and there's an opera in the style of Mozart being sung. I was like, oh great, I'm going to totally go for it and try to make this sound as close to Mozart, as I can. My favorite composer, I guess I would say. And yeah, for that reason, I thought it would be really interesting to sort of deceive the audience. Like to begin, they're like, wait a minute, are we at the right opera? I thought this was a new opera. And originally it began like with this aria, like in the style of, classical style. But eventually we decided it needed some kind of kick at the beginning. And so there's a short kind of fanfare, which is based on a theme that you hear later. And then it kind of launches into this classical sounding music.
But it was a very, very effective way. And then of course you get pulled into the music of the war as the war starts. And it
Yeah,
was just
yeah.
just dramatically, musically, just 2 thumbs up
Thank you.
from this audience member. And it's a piece that I hope, sometime in the future I have a chance to conduct because it,
Oh, I
it was
hope so too.
just powerful. Let's talk a little bit about the piece that our audience heard to open tonight's rebroadcast concert from the opening of the 2019-2020 season, your piece, Inspiring Beethoven. As I recall, it was written for the Phoenix Symphony for a Beethoven festival that they did in the early 2000s. And many years ago, I did some concerts with the Phoenix Symphony, and I knew Hermann Michael, their music director, and thought he was just a wonderful conductor, great musician, a wonderful person. So tell us a little bit about how the piece came to be.
Well, that's exactly how it came to be. It was written in 2001, I think. If I might be wrong about that, but that was really one of my first professional commissions right out of finishing my doctorate, and so very exciting for me to be part of this. It was a Beethoven festival, and I think what they did was commission a composer for there might have been some concerts where they had 2 of the Beethoven symphonies, and then you could write your piece as a kind of reaction to either symphony. And I think for mine it was the 7th. There might have been another one, but for me, I wanted to do something that was a reaction or sort of based on some material from the 7th Symphony, and so that's what I did. And again, one of my first professional opportunities.
And I think the conceit of the piece, at least as it's described in your program note, about trying to imagine the turbulent life that Beethoven was living, and how this joyful music comes out of that turbulence, I thought was just a wonderful way, because it gives you, the chance to write a real sort of powerful rock'em sock'em beginning, and then out of that comes the quotes from Beethoven. It just was, I thought, a very effective piece. Now, I was intrigued because as we talked about setting up this discussion, you said that more recently, I think just after we played the piece back in 2019, you had revised it and shortened it. And my first reaction to that, though I didn't express it to you, was, why would you do that? It seemed perfect to me as it is. So when you go back to a piece that's 15 plus years old, what was it that made you want to go back to it, and how did you do that process of trimming it and redoing it?
Well, the reason that I decided to do it was that the parts, the orchestral parts for the piece were in such bad shape that we really needed to print a new set. And I think some of them, it was a story that I don't remember so well, but I lost my computer when I was in Rome. I was in Rome for this year at the Academy in Rome, and I wrote this piece and two other orchestra pieces, and it was stolen. Actually, my computer was stolen, and I didn't back up anything. So I remember we had to kind of rely on parts that weren't in very good shape and kind of Xeroxes and stuff. So it was time to kind of like do a new set that looked better, that was, professional for the orchestras that played it. And I thought, well, this is a good chance actually to look back at it. It's a piece that has not been commercially recorded. And I thought, why not get this thing right? Because it does seem that a lot of orchestras are interested in it. I think for the reasons you said, it's like an interesting story. It can be programmed with Beethoven, and it that it kind of tells an interesting story. I think, as I was saying about opera, that this is an imaginary story, well, where opera is a real story. But so that was really the thing that led me to just look at the score again, and I started with just changing some of the orchestration, because that's something you really do learn over the years.
Sure.
What works better, what can you do to help the orchestra play it better, especially in a short amount of time. What are the things that you can rehearse forever and ever, and it will never quite get exactly right, that you could alter just a little bit to help the orchestras really really be able to play it well. And those things I've learned over the last however many years it's been, 20 years since I wrote the piece. And I did think that there were some places where it could be trimmed, that was a little, just the pacing could be just abbreviated a bit. So anyway, I hope that you'll, I will send you, if I think somebody has played that or is planning to play that new version, and maybe you can tell me what you think of it.
Yeah, I'd love to see the score, and because it's a piece I really like, and I imagine if I have the opportunity, I'll program it again, and I would want to program the version that is your official version. So I'll have that opportunity, and someday that old the score of the old version that's sitting in my library will be a collector's item of sorts.
I don't know.
Some graduate student will get their hands on it and have their thesis topic
Right.
on a silver platter. So I guess the last thing I'd like to talk about, you just mentioned finishing a new opera. So I was curious to know what you're working on now, and especially what that opera is, and when some of us might have a chance to see it and hear it.
It is based on the book The Hours by Michael Cunningham,
Mhm.
and it is commissioned by the Met and the Met Opera, and also the Philadelphia Orchestra. And so it will be performed by the Philadelphia Orchestra in March in a kind of concert version, which we will determine how that will work exactly. But a great opportunity to work with that orchestra. And then it'll go to the Met in November of 2022. So it stars Renee Fleming and Joyce DiDonato and Kelly O'Hara as the three leads, which is just an incredible, dream cast.
Yeah,
And
really.
working
Lucky
hard
you.
lucky me for sure. I'm working hard to write their parts in a way that like I was saying with the orchestra, that they feel they can sing it the best that they can. But yeah, Greg Pierce wrote the libretto. We've been working on it for a couple of years now. I just finished orchestrating it. Yeah, it's just a massive project. You know, it's you were saying that Silent Night is nice because there's more singing than you often hear, you know, and as opposed to like sort of speaking singing, you know, uh, that you kind of question whether it should actually be sung or if it could just be spoken. I feel like there's a lot of that in Silent Night actually, and in this opera, one of the things that I really wanted to do was to avoid those situations, and you know, to have a reason to sing everything, and so I think Greg Pierce has given me a libretto which it really did inspire music and singing, and I hope that others feel the same way when they hear it.
Yeah, that's really, I think, an interesting, and be interesting to see sort of how styles change, because of course, you know, back in Mozart's day, generally the singing and the speaky stuff, whether it was recitative or actually spoken dialogue in his Singspiels, was very separate, and
Yeah,
both were present in most operas. And then, of course, the recitative sort of fell away in the Wagner era, and everything was being sung. And then in the 20th century, you get things like La Boheme, which has lots of, in effect, spoken music, just very fast at almost at real speaking tempo.
right.
You have the same thing in Salome and things like that. And then we sort of got in, like in the middle and late 20th century, into this thing where I think a lot of composers thought, well, people don't sing. And then the
Yeah,
folks in the audience said, "Where's my singing?"
yeah.
Uh,
It's
so,
really hard. Yeah, yes, you're exactly right. And I mean, the issue also is that everyone's afraid of melody too. So
well,
um,
melody is hard sometimes.
melody's hard. It's hard to do something that you feel is not, you know, trite or overdone or sounds like something else, I guess. Um, Yet you can give the singers lines that can, you know, where they can use their voice in the way that most opera singers like to use their voice. So it's a really hard thing to do, and opera is just it's a difficult medium, really for that reason. Yeah, because you know if you have conversation, you want it to feel realistic at some level, and these composers like you mentioned, you know, Puccini really figured it out. I mean, you
Oh
know,
yeah,
and Benjamin Britten too. I mean, some singers
absolutely.
they think that Benjamin Britten it's all recit, like everything is kind of speak singing. Yeah, and it also is sung really well. I mean, it sings well too. So you know, he really figured it out. It's not easy, but there's a lot in the orchestra. Actually, in the hours, the orchestra and the chorus. There's a very big chorus part. Like they're constantly kind of singing the inner, the subconscious and the thoughts and the fears of these characters. So I'm interested in the kind of sound world of the piece, and I hope we've done something that's different. You know, that it hasn't been heard. Yet, and well, or maybe just that it has an interesting kind of personality, and like the piece has a memorable kind of aura to it. Is all I can really hope for.
Well, I'm sure it will, and I'm excited to hear about it. I mean, the chances of me actually getting to New York to see it in November of 22 are probably slim, but I hope it'll be on the movie docket, and so
I
I
think
can
you
go to the
will.
movie theater and see it, because that would be something really very exciting. Kevin Putz, it's been so nice to talk to you. Wonderful to think about this great piece of yours inspiring Beethoven that we heard tonight, and to think back of that performance from a couple of years ago. And I hope we'll have more music of yours at the Dayton Philharmonic and Dayton Opera in future seasons. So good luck to you. Thanks for being with us, and above all, take care and be healthy.
You too, and thank you so much, not only for playing the piece, but for having me today.